Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first ever Insomnia Discovery Q&A. Did you see the difference in the thumbnail, Michelle?
I
Honestly?
did not. And right now, as you were saying first ever, I was like, wait, what are we doing? I was like, I thought this was a Q&A.
Oh, it is. It is a Q&A. It's nothing different except that, and I was preparing this for a little backstory as we were waiting for people who come in here. The other day, I was chatting with our friend and fellow coach, Alina, and she
Mhm.
brought up something that, I've thought about myself, which is like, she said, I don't really like the word recovery because it's kind of like, it implies that there was something wrong, that we had some kind of like illness or condition or something like that. And I've seen the same, but at the same time, you have to use words that people understand. But anyways, I was pondering that. And then I was thinking like, we know, right, that the path of leaving insomnia really has a lot to do with like learning and education. So I was
Yeah.
thinking maybe we can look at it not as recovery, but discovery.
Oh, okay. I feel you. I like that.
You like it?
I like it. Yeah.
So that's why we have our discovery Q&A today, and we'll see if it sticks and not. But
It
that was a
goes
little thing,
well with Q&A. It sounds like a discovery Q&A.
right?
I like
It has
that.
a completely different ring to it, right? Recovery has a little bit of a heavy feeling to it.
Yeah,
Discovery
it
is more
can.
lighter.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, there's already, I had the wrong tab up. We already have some questions, which is really fantastic. We'll get to them in a second. But there was one more thing. Oh, I just want to make another announcement, which I did Monday too, but today as well. That for anyone interested in becoming a sleep coach and joining the movement as a sleep coach, deadline for application is going to be like October 31st, and we're starting our next batch November 15th.
Exciting.
Right?
Yeah.
And we have just actually updated our questions for the final exam.
Yes, that's true.
And for those of you who don't know, which is all of you, of course, I asked Michelle to write half of them, and I wrote half of them. But I uploaded them. You have written some really great questions. Was it a lot of work coming up with questions, or it flowed pretty completely
It
to you?
it wasn't not really, no, actually, it wasn't too bad. I thought it might be, because I hadn't really done it before, but once I started, there was just a certain momentum, and it just kind of
Right?
went pretty
Flowed.
quickly, actually. Yeah.
All right, so we'll hop into questions, but just before we do, I'll say for everyone, yeah, if you're thinking of becoming a sleep coach, then you can head over to our website and you'll find information there about it and a link and how to set up a call and everything else. All right, so that's that. Yeah, let's look at some questions. Um, Libby is here, and Libby's pretty much always there, like right on time every Wednesday. So
Hi,
thanks for
Libby.
tuning with us. Hi, Libby. And she's writing, even though I'm sleeping better, I'm struggling with lingering hard feelings toward my husband for his tough love approach when I was at my worst.
Mm,
Constantly hearing everyone gets tired sometimes. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. It made it tougher to be kind to myself on hard days. Yeah, I hear, understand the question, of course. And yeah, when you hear this, all this, Michelle, what comes to your mind? To
yeah.
mind?
Well, Libby, I actually really relate to this, and actually somebody, one of my clients the other day was just asking me about sort of the impacts of insomnia on relationships, on marriages, and it's because we don't experience this in a vacuum, right? We're experiencing it with the people around us, and it impacts them as well. And so I completely understand. There tends to usually be some challenges, especially with the partner. If we're with a partner, it tends to be with that person. And I think what's tricky is that when we're going through insomnia, we feel like, okay, well, but we're the ones going through the hard thing here, right? So our partners need to kind of provide us with kind of endless support and love and all of this. And of course there's a part of that that I feel like is true, but so often we can overlook that they're going through something too, right? It's hard for them as well. And they may not feel really equipped to understand or to know how to support us. And so, Libby, with what you were describing, that kind of that tough love approach, there are many times where my husband has had that approach with me, more so in the past, not just with insomnia, just in general, but also towards the beginning of my insomnia. And what helped me a lot was to understand that that was very well intentioned, And right, as opposed to, why is this person reacting this way? It might feel really cold to us in the moment, but I'm sure that his intention with it was actually to be helpful as opposed to anything else, and that everybody has such different approaches and styles, whether it comes to how they are showing up to their own emotions or how they're helping take care of others and responding to other people's struggles and emotions. And so sometimes the approach we would take with people is the approach we expect from other people. And then we can get really disappointed or hurt if somebody is approaching us in a way that isn't sort of our approach, if that makes sense. We start to expect ourselves from other people, from our partners. And it's tricky because they are their own people with, their own approach and their own, history. And so sometimes even just taking away that expectation that because he didn't approach it in the way that maybe you would have preferred, that, well, it wasn't supportive or it wasn't well intentioned, when really it likely was. Also, he may not have known how else to approach that situation, and just to even have empathy for the fact that it's hard on our partners too, and they don't always know what to do in that situation can be helpful. So that was something that really, really helped me, because I went through a lot of this as well. And we can start to have certain expectations that, our partners, it may not even be fair to put those expectations all on one person either. So that's a whole other conversation, as, how much support and, is reasonable. Should we really look to our partners for the full kind of emotional support that we may need during this kind of what can be a very intense and challenging time? And what if that person isn't necessarily equipped to kind of show up for us in the way that we want? So anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, but yeah, I've thought about this one a lot, and to me, it's like a bit of a complex sort of situation, because there's two people involved with their own emotions and challenges and histories that are kind of coming together, and oftentimes that doesn't go smoothly. So you're definitely not alone, Libby. I think this is challenging, not just for the person going through insomnia, but for our partners, for our friends, for our families. And it's sort of a time that if we can give everybody involved a little bit of extra patience and grace, that it tends to be very helpful. And I think I'll end on that, because I could keep going, but Daniel's like, exactly. You gotta get that timer on. Remember, you gotta get that.
Yeah, the timer.
This is what happens.
No. In all seriousness, I was like, I was really just impressed, because you had clearly pondered this before, Michelle, much more than I think I had, and you made so many great points about how we can, like, we can ourselves we can treat ourselves in a certain way. Maybe some of us are kind of like, we like the tough love approach, and that's how we kind of approach ourselves, right? But that's not necessarily what other people find most helpful. That's a great point. And the other point about how, like, imagine, like, it takes quite a lot to fully understand insomnia. Like, that's why we have, like, all these teachings and everything we have, right? And so it's not strange that for your husband, Libby, or for any other partner, they may not know what to say and what to do. It can be really difficult for that person. And I've actually intended to make more content around that, and talk about how we can be a supportive person to somebody with insomnia. So
yeah,
more
absolutely.
to follow on that.
Absolutely. I think when people are using a bit of a tough love approach, if you ask them about why, so this might be helpful, Libby, if you can sit down with your husband at a time where things are relatively calm, so not mid-fight or anything like that, and sort of start that conversation, and maybe start with explaining how it has made you feel, that tough love approach has made you feel. But then ask him sort of what were his intentions, and how did he feel during all of that as well, so it's not so one-sided. And I would be very shocked to discover him sort of saying anything but, well, but I thought that would be helpful. And I know that that's something my husband has said to me in the past. Well, I thought if I did it the other way, that it actually wouldn't help you in the long term, right? Maybe it might make you feel better in the moment, but I want it to be more helpful. And sometimes when people can understand, well, this approach isn't actually the most helpful for me, but here's what would be really helpful in the moment for me, like, here's what I need, then they can kind of start to meet you there a little bit better if they actually know. But then also vice versa. What was he struggling with the most? What does he need in that situation as well? And I think we can kind of forget about that piece of it because we think we're the only ones that are struggling because we're the only ones that are in it, but we're not
Yeah.
the only ones that are struggling with it.
Yeah. Very, very nicely put again. And just super quickly, this is such a rich topic. I can see we could talk about this only this for such a long time. But one thing I have pondered a lot is like when we get into arguments with people, usually it's our as a partner, right?
Us.
You know, I think it kind of boils down to like an idea that they should not have reacted or thought that way. Like the
Yeah,
way they did something was not the way they should have reacted, right?
yeah.
And then we get upset, and then of course they're like, "But why are they reacting? They're
Mhm.
not." So it kind of boils down to that often. But anyway,
Yeah.
let's move on to our next
Yeah, can
question
I
because
say
this is a
one
big one.
last thing on that? I remember it made me think of a quote, and I think I may have already referenced it, but I remember reading somewhere, "Stop expecting you from other people." And I was like,
Mm,
"Oh, so true," because that's part of that, right? If we're expecting other people to think like us, to respond like us, to give emotional support like us, then we're probably gonna be disappointed when
yes,
people are their own people,
yes, right.
basically. How dare they? So,
Exactly.
yeah.
How dare they be? Oh, that's a great one. Okay, very well. And Matheus is also here with us and says, "Hi, coaches. My insomnia caused my heartbeat anxiety.
Yeah.
Any recommendations to overcome deal with heartbeat anxiety?" I can go first here. And because I have like this teaching that I really like to share when it comes to this like palpitations and other like physical manifestations of anxiety, and it is to like think of them in the context of context, meaning Matthias, if you think you use an example, I don't know if there's any sport you like, but I'm just going to say like you're a big soccer fan and you're watching like your favorite team right in the finals, like and if somebody asked you like, okay, how are you feeling this moment, what are you feeling this moment, probably if you took a moment to reflect upon it, you would see that your heart is beating really fast, your breathing is shallow, like you're sweating, like you have all these tingling things. But it's in context. You're like, of course I feel this way, like I'm watching this exciting soccer game, right? Why wouldn't I feel that way? But the reason this like palpitations and manifestations can be so triggering for us when they're in the context of anxiety is that there is no obvious reason. We're just like, we're anxious, and anxiety produces like our heartbeat, like our heart beats really, really fast, but there's no obvious reason to us, like externally. So we're like, why am I breathing? Why my heart beating so fast? Something must be wrong. Then we think it's wrong. Then it beats even faster. So I think a lot of what helps us to see that actually it's not strange at all to have a heart that's beating really fast when we're anxious. It's completely normal. And the more we go towards like, oh, of course I'm feeling this right now because I'm anxious,
Mhm.
then the opposite happens. Like it becomes normalized. There's less of a reaction, less of a heartbeat, and things get calmer. So that's what I thought. But what do you think when you hear this, Michelle?
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree, and I really, really resonate with this one, because I also had heartbeat anxiety too. I would say for the majority of the 5 years of my insomnia, I had pretty intense heartbeat anxiety at times because my heartbeat would become so fast, so loud, I would hear it in my ears all the time, and I almost became obsessed with it at times. Like I would think about it constantly. I had a Fitbit at the time, so I was constantly measuring my heart rate, but then also freaking out about, oh gosh, it's really high, and constantly feeding into that cycle. And it was also kind of like what you're saying, that context around it. So we're telling ourselves this story of how what it means that our heart rate is fast or beating, like pounding, right? That it's really bad, or why is this happening, or this must be a negative sign of some kind. So we're attaching all this really negative signs to or meaning. And I remember I used to also feel like this is really dangerous. So that was this main story I told myself, this is dangerous for my heart to be doing this. And that was part of what fed into a lot of the fear. And I remember being terrified at times to like, well, I shouldn't go for a walk because my heart rate will go even higher, or I shouldn't exercise, or I shouldn't do anything that could upset myself because of my heart rate and the impact of my heart rate. and all of that. And so realizing what's the narrative I'm attaching to this heart rate, or what's the context, right, that I'm
Yeah.
putting around all of this can be really impactful. And one of the things that helped me was just like what you were saying, Daniel, really normalizing it as part of anxiety, to say this is a very normal, common anxiety symptom. Might even be a little weird if my heart rate wasn't elevated at all, considering the anxiety I'm experiencing. And then the other thing I also would kind of, to change the narrative, would start saying to myself things like, look how strong my heart is, or I would envision my heart pumping all the blood in my body and like helping me kind of live and thrive, and sort of changing the narrative a little bit on what it means when when the heart is doing that, essentially.
Yeah. Nicely said. And one more thing I want to add to this is just it's interesting how when we are exercising, it's often looked as a sign that we're doing good exercise. Like we got to get our heart rate up there, right? That's
Got
a
it up
good
there.
thing,
Yes, we
right?
did it. Yeah.
But when it comes to like feelings, the anxiety is it's almost like, oh no, this is not bad, but it's the same heart. It's the same heart doing the same thing. So no medical device here, to anyone. But my thinking here is like, if your heart beats fast for any reason, it's probably, if anything, helpful exercise rather than anything else.
Mm.
Um, all
Context.
right.
Context is so important. It's like, what are you telling yourself about it?
The story. It's always
Yeah.
about the story. Michael is here again. Thanks for being here again, Michael. Thank you, coaches. You provide wonderful content. I'm 53 and have had chronic insomnia for 3 years. Did the sleep hygiene, teas, no help.
Mm.
Is it possible to be able to live with this for life? Is it possible to live with this for life? Is the question here. And yeah, many things come up to my mind when I hear this. But what do you think when you hear this, Michelle?
Yeah. First thing, Michael, is that sure, it's possible to live with this for life, but you don't have to. You absolutely don't have to. There is, a way out and a way to, go through a recovery process. And we were just talking about the word recovery, but can't help
Discovery process.
yourself, right? A discovery process. And so, yes, you absolutely could. But you don't have to, essentially. And that's part of why we're here to help and offer kind of different ways to support people through that process. What were you thinking about when you first saw that?
Yes, very similar. Exactly the same thing. That yes, it's possible. I mean, we have our good friend and fellow coach Beth, who
Yep.
struggled with insomnia for like 42 years. That is a long time,
Yep.
and she's in perfect health.
Yep.
She's doing great. So it's possible to live with it for many, many years. But there's no reason to. Just like a little bit of education, hard work, and things get easier for sure. Thanks for asking, Michael. All right, Tom is here. Most of the people asking questions are people who have seen before here, so it's nice to see you back, Tom. Hi, Coach Daniel, Coach Michelle. Hope you guys are doing well. We are, at least I am. How are you, Michelle?
I'm doing well.
Very nice.
Yes.
I was wondering why I have fragmented sleep in the morning, particularly 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. I usually go to bed at 11 p.m. or 12 noon. Okay, so yeah, the question here is like, why fragmented sleep in the morning there, 7 to 9 a.m.? I usually go to bed at 11. Okay, interesting. And what do you think, Michelle, when you hear this?
Oh, I think it's really normal. And even like insomnia aside, if you think about it, we tend to have more of our lighter sleep in the second half of our night. And the other thing is that by the 7 o'clock, kind of 9 o'clock time frame, I think also you had mentioned, Tom, you're going to sleep maybe around midnight. So by that point, you don't have a lot of sleep drive or need to be sleeping left. And so that combination of your sleep drive is going to be really low at that time. It's going to be close to waking for you. And in addition to the idea that we really are going to get the majority of our lighter sleep in the second half of the night, which means it's going to be easier to just wake up more frequently, have a little bit more of that fragmented sleep. And so I would say that's really, really very normal. And the only problem comes when we start to view that as a really big problem that we somehow need to fix.
Yeah, 100%. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about like the narrative again, the
Yeah.
story we tell ourselves, and how that really impacts our experience of life. And for me, when I have that fragmented sleep, or we can think of it as just like sleeping in and drifting in and out of sleep,
Yes,
it can
yes.
be very pleasant when the narrative is like, oh, this is normal, this is nice. But when this narrative is like, this shouldn't be happening, it changes. But yeah, experience this very much. I think it's completely normal, for the exact reason you said.
It also made me think of the weekend, like sleeping in a little and being kind of in and out, but in that way that
Yeah,
was like kind of luxurious
yeah, exactly.
in a way. And also oftentimes, again, because you'd mentioned that, midnight and then 7 to 9, it could be that from 7 to 9, maybe your body just doesn't really need that extra bit of sleep. Now, of course, you can still get it, but maybe that's also a sign that, that you don't really need that much sleep after 7, and so it's going in and out a little bit more. And you could either choose to kind of enjoy that, ride the wave of that, or say, you know what, maybe I'll get up at 7 because I don't particularly enjoy the fragmented sleep.
Yeah, a great point, and exactly my thoughts too. That we're all different, but I mean, personally, I think I probably fall asleep usually around 11:30, and I get up at 6, and I think that's pretty typical.
Yeah.
And expecting to sleep, let's say from 11 to 8, maybe few people sleep that long. So good point there too. Oh, here's Blade Fury, who made a comment today actually that's going to turn into an Insomnia Insight video. A little spoiler there, but anyway, let's read this. Blade Fury says, "Hi Daniel, Michelle. Been struggling with insomnia from the start of the year. I will go months sleeping fine, then it starts up again. But last week I got these hypnic jerks that lasted most of the night, and every night since, it really disrupting my sleep, and they're difficult to ignore. Any advice on this? I also have bruxism with jaw clenches as I'm falling asleep. Also comes and goes. But all of this came when my insomnia started."
Hmm.
Yes, common question, this one. But firstly, I want to say, Blade Fury, I'm glad that you'll go months sleeping fine. That's nice. And
Yeah.
I always like to point that out because we have the answer there. Like when we're sleeping fine, it really comes from letting go and not attempting to sleep. But things can be tricky. So yeah, what do you hear? What do you think when you hear this, Michelle?
Yeah, very much the same. So Blade, it makes so much sense when you said, but this really only started with my insomnia, right? These jerks, these twitches, the jaw clenching. And yep, that makes sense because it's really all different symptoms of having higher hyperarousal, right? Or to think of it as anxiety and stress around sleep. And so when we're in these hyperaroused states, we're going to start to have some different physical symptoms, and everyone's different. And so, there's various different symptoms that can show up, but not all of them always do, if that makes sense. Some people will have a lot of jerks and twitches, and other people won't. They might have sweating, or they might, have any other number of things. So it makes a lot of sense that it's showing up. And I think the question is that, I'm having a hard time ignoring it. And I think one of the first things that happens, and I had a lot of jerks and twitches, and I hated them so much. I was so scared of them. They felt awful. And so I was always trying to get rid of them, resist them, ignore them, anything I could do to try to kind of make them not happen. And that tends to be the mistake, is because they feel really unpleasant, we start to come into such a place of fear and resistance to the sensation that we're feeling in our bodies. And that response is actually, producing the opposite effect that we want. It's probably going to reinforce to our brain that this particular sensation is something to be worried about. It's not entirely safe. And then what do we get? We get more of that sensation. We get maybe that same sensation, but intensified, all of those things. So we don't realize that our response to that particular sensation or group of sensations is actually kind of either helping or hurting us, depending on what direction that we're going. So it can be helpful to know these are unpleasant, but they're really safe to have, and to see if you can practice changing the way you're mentally and emotionally responding to the unpleasant sensations, and notice if that can, again, not in the moment being like getting rid of these things, because that's not the goal, but to notice if that can build a little bit more ease into the experience. And over time it can help your brain let go of some of the fear around that particular sensation, or the resistance rather.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, when as we were reading it, I picked up on that too. Like the spidey senses was like, okay, this is something to talk about. Then I forgot about. But yeah, exactly. Trying to ignore um, is almost like sometimes I thought we should make one video where we talk about these almost like little catchphrases when we find ourselves thinking, I'm trying to ignore. What are we
Yeah.
really trying to do? It's basically we're trying to not think of something, which is impossible. It's like try not to think of the pink elephant. Like, of course we think about it. So yeah,
Yeah.
really helpful to see that when we're not attempting to ignore, then things just like thoughts and everything becomes more
Because
fleeting, right?
ignoring and acceptance is not really the same thing.
Right. Good
I think
point.
that's what it comes down to, and it can and that there can be a little bit of a fine line there, but they feel quite different. If you've ever noticed when you're trying to ignore something, there's still an element of resistance or tension, maybe some stress with that, versus if you're accepting something, it just feels lighter, a little bit easier, as opposed to that resistance and that tension, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Wow, nice said. Okay, we'll do let's do one. Oh, Neil is here saying hi. Hi, Neil. Do you
Hi,
think I can be a guest on Of course. Yeah, you're super
anytime, Neil.
welcome. We'll set that up, Neil. We'll set that up. That would be super nice. Maybe we can do one of these.
Let's do one with the 3 of us.
Oh yeah,
Let's
it's
do it.
it's decided.
This
Okay,
is
Neil.
long overdue.
2 weeks from today, or so, we'll do the three of us. That will be amazing.
I'm in.
So fun. Okay. Yeah, let's do one more.
Do
Actually,
it.
we are kind of stretched on time, but yeah, one more. This is yeah, let's do this one. Oh, and before that, we'll just check in with Brandon. Hey, coaches, love your work. I've been sleeping overall better and less afraid and worried about being awake. Don't know when or how it will be back to normal, but I'm on the right track. Thanks.
Brandon, that's
Oh,
so
nice.
great.
Brandon has been here a couple times. Super glad to hear this.
Amazing.
Wow. All right. Namrah says, hi, now I'm sleeping better than before. And after good nights of sleep, now due to some reason, I have to sleep in another room. And all these thoughts of not being able to sleep in another room came.
Yeah.
All right. So we have the question, so Namrah says, sleeping easier, but for some reason, I haven't started sleeping in another room and now having some struggle there. Yeah. What do you think when you hear this, Michale?
Yeah. It sounds like anxiety is coming to visit you, right? Which is always, we don't particularly enjoy it, but it makes a lot of sense, right? As you're sort of recovering from insomnia, there comes a point where, okay, I'm sleeping more, I'm feeling better, but it's in your own environment, in your own bed. And when you're in that stage and maybe you have to travel somewhere, or you're sleeping in a different bed, room, all these things, it can result in a little bit of that fear being triggered or that anxiety coming up. And it's just really normal, right? You're going to be in a new environment and your brain is going to be a little bit more hypervigilant, kind of like what's going on. So you've shaken things up a little bit, but that's not a bad thing, right? And I think the problem is when we interpret the presence of our anxiety or fear as being a bad thing, going back to this idea of like, what's the narrative? What's the context, right? If it's a bad thing, then yeah, it's going to be really stressful and all of this. But if we can know that it's normal, it's meant to show up, and focus instead on how are you moving through that experience of your anxiety and fear coming back because you're in a new bed, and see if you can practice facing it and being with it differently. And really, that's the way to go, so that eventually you can start to feel completely okay, not only when you are sleeping well and anxiety isn't around, but sort of regardless of what is showing up.
Yes, yes. Very, very nicely said, Michelle. And I think we I don't know who of us, like we interpret the question a little bit differently.
Oh,
For
did I interpret that
yeah,
wrong?
for me, I think for you it became the very common scenario of like I'm overall sleeping easier, but when I'm in another room, then I have some struggle again. Very, very common. To
Yeah.
me, I heard it as Namrah was sleeping better, but probably to me I heard it as like Namrah sleeping better, but had some anxiety, and then probably decided to go to another room, to
Oh,
leave the bed. I don't know which one it is. We don't know, but
I don't know. We may never know.
we may never know.
We may never know.
But if it's the latter, then my thought was like, it's just helpful to have this awareness of like effort that, okay, if
Yeah.
you went to another room to try to sleep, to try to maintain the like
Uh,
progress you had, like make sure you don't fall back. And if that was if leaving your own bedroom was intended to kind of protect your sleep, it's a little bit of an effort there. And we just know the fundamental truth
Yeah.
that the more we try to do things to protect or preserve or maintain sleep, the more
Yeah.
struggle we have. It could be an invitation to just see that.
Yeah, completely. That's why we have 2 coaches here today.
Right?
Yes.
But I mean, it's not, I mean, we just have a little comments here in, when we're doing real coaching, we have like the back and forth, of course.
Yeah,
So
exactly. No, I'm glad you caught that because I completely did not.
I don't know. Maybe we don't know who,
But either
who
way,
read it.
it's almost like we got to answer 2 questions. We covered
Yeah.
all bases.
We got
So
two for one.
that's right, exactly.
All right. Well, we'll conclude there. Thanks everyone for being here, for submitting questions. Neil, we'll get back in touch with you. And that's all for today.
All right. Bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Bye, Michelle. Bye, everyone.
Bye.